4:30 in the morning, 27 degrees. Today's goal is Horn Creek. I love the solitude of the morning, alone on the trail, pre-dawn. 3.5 or 4 miles in. Sun isn't up yet, but it's becoming a nice warm morning. I probably overdressed a bit. Today's hike is to Horn Creek via Bright Angel Trail to Havasupai Garden, then west on the Tonto Trail to the destination. I've never been to Horn Creek before, but Bright Angel Trail is closed beyond Havasupai Garden. I do have the option of hiking South Kaibab to the river and back today, but access to South Kaibab Trail is a headache. On this late November day, the daylight hours are limited, and I want a hike where I can walk out of my hotel room and back without having to use a car, and I'd like to get back well before sunset. The hike is a bit less than 15 map miles. The park's mileage sometimes varies in its printed materials, but with the walk from Maswick Lodge, where I'm staying, I think it's fair to call it an even 15, and that's about 24 kilometers round trip. There are two segments to this hike. First, the familiar 4.5 miles to Havasupai Garden. That segment is divided into 3 sections, 1.5 mile rest house, 3 mile rest house, then the gardens where there's a ranger station, composting toilets, and treated water available year-round. In summer months, there's also treated water at the 2 rest houses. There's about a 3-mile stretch along the Tonto Trail to Horn Creek. Horn Creek has some primitive campsites, a composting toilet, and reported shade from a few cottonwoods. It's a stop along the almost 25-mile hike from Bright Angel Trailhead to Hermit's Rest Trailhead. I'd once considered doing this as a day hike, but as the years pass, and with the lack of treated water, that's become less likely, but hey, you never know. The only treated water source is here at Havasupai Gardens. There's water at Horn Creek, but it may be contaminated by radiation from the orphan uranium mine located above. The Park Service recommends that you don't consume this water. I have a video about the orphan mine and the neighboring Kachina Lodge. Bright Angel Trail was originally used by native peoples making their way to the garden area, which has year-round water. There's archaeological evidence of granaries and prehistoric occupation. It was known for more than 100 years as Indian Garden, and superficially the name change to Havasupai Gardens seems enlightened, as there were Havasupai people living there until the early 1900s. However, the Havasupai were only the latest people to live here. There's evidence of ancestral Puebloan, Kohonina, Hualapai, Paiute, Hopi, Pai, and Navajo occupation as well. In fact, during the excavation for the pipeline repairs, a Hopi burial site was found last year. So with so many peoples having lived here, perhaps Indian Gardens is not so misguided a name, or perhaps a more broad but sensitive name would be more accurate. But naming conventions are not necessarily logical at Grand Canyon. Today we're taking the Tonto Trail, and Tonto means stupid in Spanish. Go figure. Bright Angel Trail was first used to access mining claims in the canyon. Starting in 1891, Ralph Cameron chartered the trail. Mining claims were not very successful, but tourism was, and Cameron began charging $1 to access the trail. In today's money, that's about the same amount as the $35 admission fee to the park. Cameron eventually used mining and water claims to control 13,000 acres of Grand Canyon. He first developed Indian Garden as a tourist camp and planted the cottonwood trees that now characterize the area. Now, after a tourist was killed by a falling tree limb at Bandelier National Monument, the Park Service has cut a number of the cottonwoods, including those over the rest and water area at the split of Bright Angel and Plateau Point trails, resulting in a much less attractive rest stop, but likely a safer one. Most of the original structures in Havasupai Garden have been removed or renovated, resulting in a label of it being a palimpsest, P-A-L-I-M-P-S-E-S-T, a word I had to look up meaning something reused or altered but still bearing visible traces of its earlier form. Based on this, it was not eligible for a listing on the National Register of Historic Places, but I find it a pretty cool place. Cameron lost control of the land in 1927, and it passed to the Park Service. In 1931, the railroad built a water treatment facility and pump house to provide water to the South Rim, which up till then was brought in by rail cars. They built a temporary tramway from the South Rim to about Indian Garden to facilitate its construction. the Civilian Conservation Corps had enormous impact on the improvement of both Bright Angel Trail and Indian Garden, building 3-mile rest house in 1935, 1.5-mile rest house in 1936, and the Indian Garden rest house in 1937. By 1938, 18,000 people per year visited Indian Garden. Havasupai Garden Rest House, built in 1937 by the Civilian Conservation Corps. 8 in the morning, 42 degrees, Havasupai Garden, 4.5 miles into the hike. Ready to head off down the Plateau Point Trail, catching Tonto West. My only concern would be if they close this off temporarily for construction today, and they told me I had to wait till like 4 o'clock to come back through. Don't want to get caught on the trail with that going on, but otherwise all good. The gentleman just told me no closures today, so hopefully we're all good. Heading Tonto West, about 3 miles to Horn Creek. This is all new to me, so let's see how it goes. Heading out. You can see the extensive work they're doing on the pipeline replacement and update here. Pipeline comes up Plateau Point, runs into Havasupai Garden, and then up to the rim to the storage tanks. If you look off to the east, you can see Tonto East, trail we did 2 or 3 weeks ago in the Pony Loop video. This one, Tonto West, heading for Horn Creek. Beautiful morning. Cloud cover makes it nice and cool. You can hear Garden Creek running in the distance. Great day for a hike. Amidst all this construction, we come to the cutoff for Tonto West, open as promised by the Park Service. Never been here before, so I'm going to time it out about 1.5 hours, I would figure, to Horn Creek. If I don't hit it in 2 hours, I'll expect that I will have missed it and start looking back. But I believe it'll be fairly obvious. Because there are composting toilets there, as well as some cottonwood trees, reportedly. So, beautiful day for a hike. The cloud cover is keeping it nice and cool. Tonto Trail can get very hot. Let's see what we find. Here's some evidence we may be approaching Horn Creek. I wonder how Horn Creek got its name. Some ankle twisting rocks here. Kind of a rough trail in its own way. I guess this makes it official. First set of toilets. This is Horn Creek. Kind of interesting. I think it's a once and done hike, but interesting. Very beautiful scenery here. A little bit different than going on Tonto East. Tonto West is a pretty location. You get to see all the viewpoints as you look up. And I'll list them pretty soon. Cool. So this is it, Horn Creek. Took about an hour and 45 minutes to get here from Havasupai Garden. That included time to make videos. Just a quick comment on making videos. They take way more time. I would say videotaping adds an hour to every hike I do. And I'm not quite sure what the reward is. It's kind of like some people succeed on YouTube. It's kind of like the people who score big on a slot machine at the casino. It bings and it attracts you and you think maybe it'll be you, but it's never me. I spend sometimes 4 hours a day making these videos. I make somewhere between $2 and $3 a day on the 300 or so posted videos. So my general experience of YouTube is it's a fun hobby. It's kind of like playing Sudoku, but it is not a business. It is not financially rewarding. Anyway, here we are. Evidence we're here. There's evidence of tents. If we take a look over here. Evidence of a small tent pitched last night. The restrooms are up the hill a bit. I'm not planning on going up there. There's no water running, but it comes down from the Orphan Mine. I have a video about the Orphan Mine and the Kachina Lodge that is next door to it. It was a uranium mine, and this water is apparently at risk of contamination with radiation from the uranium mine. If we look over at the south rim, you can see the Hermit's Rest viewpoints, starting with Maricopa Point, Powell Point, Hopi Point, and Mojave Point as you go along. Most of the time I'm looking down. I never knew that Horn Creek was here, so I'll have some more information in the future when I'm looking down here. Horn Creek, interesting destination. Beautiful views of the Horn Creek Canyon going down. You can apparently go down Horn Creek Canyon to the river, but it takes a little bit of technical work, ropes and so forth. Beautiful morning, great day for a hike. Lunchtime here at Horn Creek and then heading back up to the rim. Here's the final verification. After lunch is done, I noticed the sign here. Probably fell off the signpost. A little image of a tent saying Horn Creek is right here. So we are in the right place, Horn Creek. It's funny how the unfamiliar seemingly takes so much longer than the familiar. The trip back from Horn Creek to Havasupai Garden took about an hour and 15 minutes, and that's taking our time going along. Had kind of a second lunch here at Havasupai Garden. It's closing in on noon. I have about 4.5 miles to go to get to the top. Hopefully we'll arrive about 2:30 p.m. Plenty of time to clean up, take a nap, and eat some good dinner. The sun is peeking back through. It's been mostly cloudy, high in the mid-50s so far. Extremely pleasant. The full sun on Tonto Trail can be brutal, and I was glad to have the cloud cover. Hopefully it won't snow again like it did on my last trip and lead to a slippery trip out of Grand Canyon, but all of these things are things you accept when you come here and hike. So far, an excellent hike. Great fun. I've been looking for these pictographs for a while and finally spotted them on this hike. They're located at about mile 1.7 on the Bright Angel Trail. They're likely from the boom of occupation that occurred about 900 years ago, and they're concrete evidence that people thrived here long before Cameron and the Bright Angel Trail. There's an informal policy to not pinpoint the location of pictographs within the park, and I won't violate that. But the pictographs just west of the first tunnel on Bright Angel Trail, known as Mallory's Grotto, are very well identified. You can look up at them just before you finish your hike. The dates of the two tunnels on Bright Angel Trail are uncertain. Cameron built a tunnel to Mallory's Grotto in 1903, but the current configuration may have been established in 1932. The second tunnel was built by Cameron at an uncertain date, perhaps 1906 to 1908, but it was certainly completed by 1913. Coming up. Come on. People make it more authentic. Thanks. The hike is over, back in the room. First, a few comments about the hike, and then a few comments about life. The hike went surprisingly well. 15 miles, about 9.5 hours, probably about 1 hour of that was making videotapes and films, whatever you call these YouTube things. And 6 miles of it was a relatively flat section. So I finished really strong, no physical issues. One of the better hikes I've had in a long time. The temperature was really nice today too. Probably only the backpack thermometer said 77, but probably the highest it was 62, 65 degrees. On this same trip, I made a video about traveling to Grand Canyon with your dog. A dog gives you many gifts, but perhaps the most poignant is his death. Your dog's death is an unavoidable lesson that all life ends. In my most recent video, I put a section at the end talking a bit about mortality. I recognize that most people don't want to consider the issue, so I put it at the end so they could simply turn off the video and not miss any of the hiking content. I kind of like the way that worked out, so I'm doing it again here. So if you don't want to think about this issue, it's time to turn off the video. At the end of my pony loop video, I said that I believe I've made peace with mortality. One commenter said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Why? I don't. I just forge ahead with my life." And I think that's a fair question to ask. I recognize that the most common way of coping with mortality is denial. Discussion of death is avoided and words like cancer are whispered. But I'm a person who's had cancer and may well still have it, and it's not a word that I choose to whisper. But I accept the challenge of the commenter. Why make peace with mortality? To me, the reasons are legion. First, it's reality. All life ends. Denying it does not stop it from occurring. To me, reality is something better accepted than denied. Second, there are multiple issues, both large and small, that acceptance of mortality helps me to deal with. Here's a small one. In the US, when you turn 65, you make a choice about which Medicare programs will help pay for your health care. The choice you make around your 65th birthday can have lasting consequences, and I have a video about that. The choice I made was to go with the more expensive and administratively difficult traditional Medicare program with a supplemental policy, rather than the cheaper and easier Medicare Advantage. That decision was informed by the fact that I accept that I am mortal, and further that I will most likely have a period before death in which I need expensive medical treatment. And now, a year into Medicare, I'm confident that I made the right decision. Making peace with mortality made this possible for me. Next, there's a lot of paperwork and planning that is best to do in advance of your inevitable death. Making peace with mortality makes this easier. Statistically, half of all Americans die without making an estate plan, although that percentage drops with age. For years, I've had a will, a power of attorney, cremation authorization form, and so forth in place. But having a casual relationship with the issue is helpful for me. For example, I have a new account in which I made a pay on death designation, as I do on all my accounts. When I added a checking account, I directed the clerk to use the same pay on death designation. It turns out the person who opened the account failed to properly enter the POD and it was not effective. Dealing with mortality as a fact of life led me to deal with this casually instead of denying the reality. When I was diagnosed with cancer, I went to each financial institution and reviewed my POD designations and carefully assured that all of my paperwork was in order, including the transfer of my car. Accepting reality makes the paperwork easier. Probably more importantly than dealing with money and property is dealing with health. There's at least a 50% chance that I will lose my ability to direct my health care and someone else will need to speak for me. There are legal documents like durable powers of attorney that make this possible. Of course, I have them. But perhaps equally important is that your decision makers understand and agree to do what you want. I've educated and maybe even berated my primary and alternate decision makers with my choices, and they've agreed to follow through. Accepting mortality has made this possible for me. Also, my choice is not to linger if I'm terminally ill. I live in a right to die state, and there's a fair chance that I will exercise that option. Although I will likely get medical care from a specialist at that point, I also need to be sure my primary care physician has no personal or religious reservations about helping me achieve my goal. I have a new primary care doctor, and I've already made an appointment to meet with him to discuss this issue. If he doesn't agree, I'll find somebody who does. Finally, there's the issue of making peace with the people you love and the people who you're related to but may not love, and the world in general. Time is limited. I had a rough relationship with my father, but I made peace with him before he died, and I'm glad I did. My time is limited, and although I'm not a great fan of humans, I'm making an effort to seek peace with people who have been important in my life. If I denied mortality or thought I would live forever, I probably would not be engaging in this process. And I guess finally circling back to hiking, why do I hike? I hike because I'm going to die. But I'm alive now and I seek to get all the best out of life. Hiking is what I like and hiking is what I do. So there it is, a bit heavy, I apologize, but to me, making peace with mortality as opposed to denial is the way I choose to live my life. Not so many people watch my videos, and even fewer watch my meditations on mortality. So if you made it this far, I offer you my special thanks for watching.